Okay. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. We're delighted you are able to join us for this evening's Brotherhood sponsored event, an insider's view into the NBA bubble. If you have any questions, please enter them into the chat box to everyone. And now let's join our host, Brotherhood board member David Press at center court.
Thanks, Brian, and thank you all for joining tonight. I know for some of us, this was not as much lead time for a program as we like to give, but we are taking advantage of a really unique opportunity. Jacob and I, and he'll tell you a little bit more about his story and his path to his career, but Jacob and I have known each other for a long time. I think he was about 12 or 13 years old when he and I first met, and he's now risen up the ranks and has spent the last 3 years with the Magic and the last 2 years as their head equipment manager. And coming out of the bubble and as we were locking up this program, not knowing when the new season was going to start. And here we are a couple nights away from the draft and just over a month away from the start of the new season. So we were able to get this in and on his calendar before all of that. And we're so grateful, Jake, for you joining us tonight. So thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to you, but really this is going to be very conversational and just us going back and forth. Me asking some questions and hopefully you answering. But as we're going, if the rest of you have questions that pop up or anything that you want to discuss, please feel free. We said it already, but please feel free to put it in the chat. And then we'll certainly have some time at the end for some Q&A and trying to keep this as informal as possible. So with that, Jake, before we dive into what everyone's really interested in, which is hearing kind of the bubble and sort of the evolution that the 2019-2020 NBA season went into. Can you just tell us a little bit about your personal background and kind of how you got started working in sports and the transition that ultimately led you to Magic and the role that you're in now?
Sure. Well, first off, thank you everybody for joining this conversation. And Dave, thanks for having me. I grew up in South Florida and grew up just outside Fort Lauderdale. And around the time when I was 12, 13, probably around the same time that I met Dave, I used to go to Marlins baseball games with my dad. And I used to sit down the first baseline with him. And our seats were right by the ball boy sitting down the first baseline. And every game that I was there, I would, stand by the railing, kind of yell over to the field. And over the course of the season, I just collected all of these baseballs from players or from the ball boy. And I used to watch him warm up with Miguel Cabrera in right field. And it was at that point that I told my dad, that's what I want to do. I want to be on the field with the team, and hopefully that'll happen one day. So that was when I was 13. And, a couple of years later, I happened to be at a spring training game. And as I was leaving the game, I see the owner of the Marlins walking to his car, and I knew his name. So I yelled through a fence. I said, "Mr. Loria, how do I become a bat boy?" And he turned around, he said, "Contact so-and-so." And that so-and-so was the equipment manager for the Florida Marlins. And so I went home, all excited. I emailed the team. And the response that I got was, "You have to be 16 years old to work in the clubhouse." And so I waited another year and emailed them again and explained the situation prior. And, I'm just about to turn 16. I really want to be a bat boy. If there's an opening, great. So at that time, there actually happened to be an opening. And so lo and behold, just before my 16th birthday, I was hired to be a bat boy for the Marlins. And I ended up spending 11 seasons with the Marlins. I joined when I was 16, just before I graduated high school. I decided that I saw a career path working in sports. And so rather than going off to college, I decided to stay local. I went to Florida International University in Miami. And that was an opportunity for me to continue laying the groundwork with the Marlins and in hopes to have a career in professional sports. Like I said, I spent 11 seasons there, kind of entered as just a quiet, kid with no work experience, and just a passion for watching baseball. And over the years, I just became infatuated, not just more so with the game, but with what goes into creating the game and allowing it to happen. And much of that lies on the shoulders of the equipment staff. Everything that you see on the field, whether it's something a player's wearing or the bat in their hands, everything's been passed through the hands of an equipment manager. And I was intrigued. I wanted to pursue that as a career. And so I spent 11 years with the Marlins, and towards the end of my time with the Marlins, not knowing it was heading towards the end, but I decided I needed to expand my knowledge with other sports and to really build a resume. And so I ended up reaching out to the Miami Heat. This was it was the year after LeBron James left Miami back to Cleveland. And so it was, I guess, a good time to try and get in. And it was another situation where I just reached out to the Heat organization. I reached out to the equipment manager directly, explained my situation, told him who I was, told him about my experience. And he ended up hiring me to be a team attendant with the Heat. And, it was there that I really started to understand that outside baseball, there was perhaps more opportunity. My job with the Heat, I was put in a position to basically manage the visiting locker room. So, and all the while I'm still working for the Marlins. I worked for the Marlins from the months of February until October. And then during the baseball off season, I would work for the Heat to just bridge that gap. And when I was working in the visiting locker room for the Miami Heat, I began to see younger equipment managers around the NBA. I got to meet everybody across the league, and I learned that in the NBA, there may be an avenue for advancement, because I saw so many young equipment managers, whereas in baseball, many of the equipment managers had been there for 30, 40 years, and it would be tough to kind of move up in the ranks. And I ended up spending a few years with the Heat, eventually starting to interview with some other NBA teams. And, I ended up, it was a situation of an opening in Orlando, which happened to only be 3 hours away from where I live. Kind of just knowing through certain channels, through the NBA, finding this position. And in the fall of 2017, I was hired as the assistant equipment manager for the Orlando Magic in a transitional role to move into the head equipment manager position at the end of the season. And so now I've been with the Magic for 3 years now. And that's kind of my background.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing. I know, you and I talked about this a lot, but your path into that role looks probably a lot different than most equipment managers around the NBA. So you don't find too many equipment managers with a bag of old dirty baseballs that they were catching as a fan in their office, which is pretty awesome. So you took us right up to this past season, and obviously the beginning of the season, all the way through about February or March looked just like any other season, I imagine. Can you tell us, sort of where were you and where was the team when things sort of got shut down, because I know for myself, one of the signals that, oh, this is real in terms of COVID, was as I was watching the end of an NBA game, and literally instantaneously they went from pausing and delaying a game to canceling it, and then the entire season was basically in flux. So I'm curious where you were and where the team was in that moment.
Yeah, it's funny because the lead up to that night, there was obviously plenty of media coverage on the coronavirus and a lot of worry among the country, but it was that night where it really everything like fell apart. It seems, and so we were just coming back from a road trip the night before the night before the season was shut down. We were in Memphis playing the Grizzlies, and we had flown home after our game. Probably got in around 1 a.m, and the next day we just had practice that morning, and it was that evening. I was sitting at home, kind of just watching TV and watching the NBA action for the night with my wife, and we just watched it all unfold. And lo and behold, the whole league shut down. The league has shut down before for lockouts for financial reasons, but never before because of a pandemic. So it was kind of one of those earth-shattering moments.
When you and I talked last week, you shared with me that the plane that you had come back on sent some shivers up your spine. So can you tell us a little bit about that for a second?
Yeah. So the charters that we fly on in the NBA are Delta planes that are chartered, and so it's a Delta 757 that's been outfitted with extra large seats. Every seat's like a first class seat, and all the NBA teams share these Delta charters. So while one plane, is picking you up, it had just dropped off another team. And the plane that took us home from Memphis to Orlando happened to be the same plane that had just taken the Utah Jazz from Utah to Oklahoma City. And we found that out the next morning. So as you can imagine, there were a lot of people that were concerned. How well was the plane clean? How does this virus transfer from one person to another? And it almost seems like there's many questions we still don't have those answers to now, months later. But yeah, I mean, for those of you who aren't familiar with what happened, it was a player from the Utah Jazz who tested positive just before their game in Oklahoma City, which led to the league shutting down, and that was the team that we had just shared a plane with.
Yeah, I can imagine the stress of that moment was exacerbated quite a bit just with that extra bit of information. So obviously things were sort of in flux for a couple of months as the league and the teams sort of tried to figure out what to do and how are we going to transition and are we going to try to resume the season and all that kind of stuff. So as the decision was made that, hey, we're gonna move ahead, we're gonna charge forward, but we're gonna do it in this really coordinated way. Talk to us a little bit about what you started to learn as information filtered down to you about how the bubble was going to be created and what your role was in helping to make it all possible.
Well, so the league shut down in March, and we didn't reach the bubble until July. So there was a few months where there was a couple months where there was absolutely no activity. And I think it was probably sometime in May when the NBA started to discuss what a restart would look like. And all it was rumors, stuff you had read on Twitter, and many of my superiors within the organization, didn't have the information either. It was really touch and go the whole way through. As things developed, I think there were certain locations that were tossed around. One was Las Vegas, which is where we normally have our summer league. And, you can perhaps, I don't see how it would work looking back, but you could bubble the NBA within a couple hotels. And they have courts out there. And then, Houston was mentioned as a possibility. And then eventually Orlando came up, and I know our organization played a big part in bringing the NBA bubble to Orlando and to Disney. The Orlando Magic's, our primary sponsor is Disney. We wear a Disney patch on our uniforms. Our CEO is buddies with, top executives from the Disney Corporation. And the NBA has always been a very well-oiled machine when it comes to large events and large gatherings. And so obviously there's a whole sensitivity to that when you're going to bring together, I think it was 20 teams, and, between players, coaches, staff, how do you minimize how many people each team brings? Whereas normally during an NBA road trip, a travel party can range from, 50 to 60 to 70 people, depending on the team. We normally on our plane, we have coaches, players, coaches, staff, and then we also have our media that travels with us. So you're talking about close to 60 people on an airplane. But how to narrow down essential staff as they deemed it. You have obviously your players you need your coaches, but many teams have lots of trainers on their medical staff. So how do you narrow that down? Obviously you need an equipment manager. So as details unfolded and then directed it towards Disney, I think that's when it started to become real. And we started to have some meetings with the NBA amongst our Equipment Managers Association, and explain to them what our needs were. And I know the trainers from the NBA, the athletic trainers, they did the same thing. The Players Association played a huge role in developing the NBA restart. But it was really a coordination amongst every facet of the NBA. And, between the NBA and Disney, you're talking about probably the two best organizations that could put together something that would run smoothly and just check off every box of things that you need to think about. And obviously this is something that has never happened before and hopefully never will happen again. But the NBA and Disney did an excellent job putting it together.
Awesome. So once the word got to you and all the other equipment managers around the league, that you were going to be entering this bubble, obviously, it's not far from home for you as compared with the other 29 teams. But, I think one of the questions you and I talked about that I was even a little surprised about was, despite being just a few miles from home, you didn't feel like you were at home once you entered the bubble. So talk to us a little bit about what that experience was like, sort of going from your home environment, even while you were quarantined and everything else, to transitioning into the bubble. And as you do that, I'm going to throw up one of the pictures that you had shared with me of just the sheer, it's probably just a fraction of it, but just the sheer amount of equipment and luggage that you had in one room in your suite in the hotel. So.
Yeah. So I guess once the NBA decided we're having this NBA restart at Disney, you start to think about what you need from a higher level. When you start thinking about, from the medical side, all the stuff that they need to bring compared to what they normally bring on a road trip. So just to give you perspective, throughout the NBA season, when we go on the road, the longest road trip that we will have will be one of our West Coast trips. We go out west twice a year, each being at least a week-long road trip. Sometimes, more. I think this past year, our longest road trip was 12 days. And so when you pack for a 12-day road trip, you're obviously packing more than you would pack for a 6-day road trip. So for the NBA bubble, we departed for Disney on July 1st, and the earliest that we were going to come back, or maybe we left July 5th, July 6th, whatever it was, the earliest that we would be back we foresaw probably 60 days later was going to be like the end of the first round of the playoffs if we were to make the playoffs. So you got to anticipate packing for at least 2 months. So whereas for a normal road trip, I would carry 30 pieces of equipment, as you can see in this photo, it's much more than that. All those bags that you see lined up on the left side of the wall, half of those bags, 4 of them are just loaded with players' shoes, basketball shoes. And then, the next set of bags, those are all practice gear. And then basically I had to transplant my equipment room from the Amway Center in downtown to my hotel room at Disney, and just had like a adjoining room and lived in my equipment room. There was a bed I slept in the room next to it. Wasn't sleeping on any trunks, but it's basically eat, breathe, sleep basketball for 2 months straight, and make sure you have everything that you need. We were able to have things shipped in. I know we're right down the street, but I couldn't have my assistant come drop something off if I needed something, if a player needed a specific type of shoes. And I had it at the facility, he had to ship it over to me, and then, basically just overpack rather than underpack.
What was the process like logistically of getting all of this equipment in? Because, I remember you were telling me you guys weren't actually allowed to bring your own stuff in because even the equipment, because we didn't know what we didn't know about the virus even at that time, you had to sort of allow the equipment to quarantine itself before anybody else came into contact with it. So
yeah. So, we teams were allowed to send their equipment to the hotel a week in advance. And if you were going to be in the NBA bubble, so the NBA told teams you can only bring, I think it was 30 people from your team, and that includes players and coaches. So it's minimal staff. You can't bring everybody you normally bring. And so they allowed teams to essentially ship everything in advance as much as they could. And so teams from up north, the Sixers, the Celtics, teams from the West Coast, the Clippers and the Lakers, they sent tractor trailers loaded with their equipment a couple weeks in advance. And they didn't allow teams to send anybody that was going to be in the bubble. So a team could send one of their athletic trainers or somebody from the team. As long as they weren't going to be in the bubble, they could come in and kind of like put the bags where they needed to go. And then you just bring everything else on the day of. So we sent a cargo truck a week in advance with the bulk of our equipment, excuse me. And then on the day of our departure, we had another 30-foot equipment truck with 2 buses loaded with, everything under the sun, and brought everything over that day as well.
And then I'm going to throw up another picture here in a minute, but tell us about the laundry facilities and like how you set up practice courts and all those kinds of things as well.
Yeah. So when we had our discussions with the NBA, the utmost priority for an equipment manager is laundry resources. And we explained how much laundry we do, how many practices we're going to have, games, the amount of sets of practice gear that we're going to need to get washed on a daily basis. And rather than trying to use facilities within the hotels, what you're looking at here is over at the Disney Wide World of Sports complex, where the arenas are, where the games were held. This complex is a huge complex, and what you're looking at is the formerly the Atlanta Braves batting cage. Atlanta Braves used to have spring training at Disney, and they converted this batting cage into a laundry facility. And behind me are 66 washers and 66 dryers. There were 22 teams in the NBA restart.
I've got the video. Just for context.
All of that plumbing you see, everything, I mean, ventilation behind the dryers and plumbing for the washing machines, that was all put there for us. And those machines were put there for us. That none of that existed before we got there. So, whereas in Summer League, in Las Vegas, in order to get laundry done, teams go to, equipment managers take their laundry to a laundromat. You can't leave the bubble here. And, the amount of wash that we're doing, we needed them to supply us, but we never knew that they were going to supply us with something like this. We had 22 teams in the NBA bubble, and they decided on 66 washers and dryers, assuming that each team, if they all showed up at once, they'd have 3 and 3 to themselves. But it was funny because we were all on different schedules for the most part. When I would go do laundry, I'd maybe see 3 or 4 other equipment managers at most. And we'd hang out and chat while we did our laundry, our team laundry.
And then talk to us a little bit about the practice courts and how those were set up.
So practice courts were basically set up. There was probably a dozen practice courts between Disney's Wide World of Sports, where they have these, I wouldn't even call them arenas, maybe just gymnasiums. They had practice courts set up there. And then within the hotel, like within a couple of the hotels, this one here that you're looking at is at the Coronado Springs Resort, where certain teams were staying. This was in a ballroom. They built out these beautiful brand new courts. I think there was 5 or 6 courts at this hotel that looked just like this in a ballroom. And as I mentioned before, yeah, there's another one. As I mentioned before, because there was limited numbers of staff and we couldn't even bring all of our coaches, it was all hands on deck. So this was a daily routine after practice was done. I'd jump in and, pass and rebound, and it was all hands on deck. Whoever was with the team had to be prepared to basically step in and play the role that they don't normally play.
It's unbelievable. And the floor was part of the shipment from your normal practice facilities into the bubble.
Yeah, what's cool is in this hotel, there was, I think, 4 ballrooms that were lined up next to each other, and each ballroom had either 1 or 2 full-size basketball courts. And we were one of the few teams who sent their actual courts. So we had 2 of our courts. This past season, that's our standard court that we normally use every night. And then we had a special court that was purchased by our team to wear on, like, it was for 15 of our home games. When we wore a specific uniform, it was on that orange and charcoal court. So we had 2 courts. The Miami Heat, they sent one of their courts. They had their like Vice City court at the bubble. The Pacers had a court, maybe 1 or 2 other teams.
It's unreal. So tell us, I think one of the things everybody's probably curious about is when practice and games weren't going on, what was a day in the life like inside the bubble?
So, I mean, we had practice every day. There was about and keep in mind, before the bubble, there wasn't really any team activity other than individual workouts at your home facility. So the lead up, which was a few weeks, was one player and one coach. And now you go into the bubble and you have a week to get ready to play games. So there was a week of practices, then a couple exhibition games, and then you started playing. You played 8 out of your 12 remaining home games that you were slated to play before the shutdown. And so we essentially practiced every day. And if we practiced in the morning, I was up, 7 a.m. putting each player's set of practice gear at his outside of his hotel room, and put all the gear out, pack up the bags that I needed for practice, and take a nice walk from our building where we slept over to the convention center where we departed for practice. We had our own designated team buses with the same drivers that stayed with us the whole way through. And so you'd go to practice, and practice would be 2 to 3 hours. And following practice, you come back to the hotel. We had a meal room, so we were fed 3 meals a day, and there were snacks and whatnot. And come back from practice, have a bite to eat, collect all of the dirty practice gear, and then hop back on the team bus to take just myself over to the laundry facility and spend at least an hour or two doing that. And then outside of laundry, if I had the rest of the day to myself, there was a pool, there was some tailgating games out in a field. The resort that we stayed at was the Grand Floridian, so we had boat rentals. And keep in mind, this resort is just to ourselves. So we had cornhole games. We had a cornhole tournament amongst several teams. Every team put in $1,000 and submitted a couple duos. So I was paired up with one of our players, and we got to play in this cornhole tournament for charity, and we played Chris Paul in cornhole, which was really cool. And then besides going to the pool, you could rent a boat, which sounds ridiculous, but you could do that. There was state-of-the-art golf courses that we had access to that were specifically just for us. And everything was on the NBA's tab. So I managed to squeeze in a couple rounds of golf. So it was summer camp for adults, basically.
That's amazing. I mean, I told you this last week, aside from the pandemic piece, it seems like every person's dream. But obviously, if you could do that and still have your wife or kids or whatever come visit you, that would be great.
Yeah.
What do you think? This is sort of an opinion question, but I'm curious. What do you think contributed to the sheer success of the bubble and the fact that it really, by and large, didn't get pierced whatsoever? Zero positive cases for whatever it was, two and a half months, something like that. And in this environment, I'm just sort of curious your thoughts on that.
Well, first and foremost, just the amount of testing that we did. When we first arrived in the bubble, as soon as we got off the bus and unloaded all of our bags and equipment, we were shuffled into a room with leaders from the NBA who explained to us, we were the first team in the bubble. This is how things are going to go. We're going to test you right away. And then as soon as we test you, you have to go to your hotel room and quarantine for 48 hours. So as soon as we got there, it was straight to quarantine, where they came to our room to test us. Once we cleared quarantine and passed, a couple tests, we started to practice, but it was testing every single morning. There was really no no loopholes, no, what if a player wants this? Can he get this? You could use your imagination on things. Like there was no permeation to the bubble, because you couldn't leave, you couldn't hop in an Uber, you couldn't order food. There were certain things you could do through the NBA, but it was everything, on your phone. You had an app, and everything you needed was on that app. Every morning, you had your own personal thermometer and a pulse oximeter. So you took your temperature, and then you measured your oxygen levels. And then once you submitted all that information, then you can go about your day. And so it was the vigorous testing. It was also very much so the pact amongst everybody, who, whether you were a player, a coach, or support staff, everybody was sacrificing something to be there. Sure, these players get paid millions of dollars, so I don't pity them one bit. But there's plenty of other people who are leaving their kids, and certain teams that made it to the finals, they were there for almost more than 3 months. So there was a sense of like, we're all in this together. Everywhere you walked on campus, everybody wore a mask. Everybody was on board and had the right attitude about it. And that was very much like a driving factor in making it work.
Amazing. As a follow-up question, do you think there are any learnings, for other organizations and companies, barring resources, obviously, but not just in sports, just in general? Are there things that the rest of the world can learn from what the NBA was able to pull off so successfully?
I think it just goes to show good leadership. If you don't have strong vocal leadership, you're not going to get anything done. Our league is very well run because it has good leaders, and they're very transparent. And everything that was done through the bubble was transparent. Everybody understood like their role, and people had the right mentality about it. And it was just so, they spent so much money on it, and there was no stone unturned. But it comes down to the leadership, and that that starts with the commissioner and then works its way down. With the NBA versus, say, Major League Baseball, when they started back up and started putting their teams on the road, not just bubble, they didn't put them in a bubble, they put them on the road. Everything was almost left up to each individual team as far as testing went, and protocols. And unfortunately, not every team's going to operate in the best manner. So when you have just a league mandate, and here's how we're going to do it, and everybody better be on board, you have a better effort by teams, collectively. Because if you have one team that isn't doing the right thing, or isn't holding up their end of the bargain, as you can see with the virus, it'll spread quick, and you'll end up with a very big problem.
Cool. I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we'll do a rapid fire round from me, and then we'll open it up to Q&A from everybody else. And I see there's some questions starting to pile into the chat. So and again, just as a reminder, if you have questions, feel free to start typing them in, and we'll get to them in just a few minutes. My last question for you is as we're starting to look ahead, the draft is in a couple nights. The season's set to tip off on December 22nd, so you'll have training camp obviously starting pretty soon, and free agency and sort of a compressed off season, if you will. For those of us who aren't following as closely, what do you anticipate, and what are sort of the current expectations for the coming season, knowing that things could change at any moment, given the world we're living in right now?
I think, and it goes for my job and our league, but it also goes for everybody. It's expect the unexpected. Don't let your guard down, and do things with purpose. It's just with this season, Like you said, everything's very compact. And so whereas normally you would have, you would finish your season and you would have essentially 3-4 months to prepare for the next season. You know, for teams like the Heat and the Lakers, they just wrapped up maybe a month ago. And they're, like you said, just about to jump into things. We're about to jump into this season in the next couple of weeks. It's this Wednesday we have the draft, and then on Friday we have free agency, and then the Monday after Thanksgiving we're opening training camp. So, you know, for us, we have 5 free agents probably leaving our team, and so we're going to piece it together real quick right before training camp starts. But I think what you'll see from the NBA is there's definitely variables when you start traveling. You know, you start to see where your vulnerabilities are, whereas in the bubble you can really control things. So, you know, things could not work out as well as you would expect, but I think it's just going to be one of those seasons with an asterisk where you look back and that was just the circumstances you were given. It's tough to put into words what to expect this next season to look like, other than it's been shortened by 10 games. And you hope that this is the last step towards better things coming in the late summer and into the next fall, when hopefully we can start back up another season where it's a little more normal. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. Your mouth to God's ears on that last piece too.
Yeah.
I'll do a couple rapid fire questions, some related to the bubble, some not, and then we'll open up. The chat's starting to fill up. So, favorite road city to visit, and you don't have to say Charlotte just because, but if it is, certainly so.
I mean, I'm not going to say Miami just because that's where I'm from, but Washington, D.C., I would say is my favorite. I love the monuments, and it's a quick walk from the hotel to the White House, and you know, you can walk the mall, and it's cool.
Awesome. Who's the tallest player you've ever worked directly with?
We had a Russian 7'2" Russian guy of the name Timofey Mozgov on our team last year, who wore a size 18.
Well, that answered the next question. I was going to ask you let's say who currently on the team wears the biggest shoes?
Currently, it's Nikola Vucevic, who will wear a size 16.5. LeBron occasionally wears a 17 if he's wearing the Giannis shoe.
While you were in the bubble, what was the favorite meal that you got served?
It's a good question. I mean, the food was pretty good. At first it wasn't great when they were bringing it to your room and you were in quarantine, but I'm not going to complain. It was all free. They had a little ice cream cart in the meal room, and they had those Mickey Mouse ice creams. So I'm going to have to go with that. I had a couple of those.
Awesome. What was your favorite activity while you were in the bubble?
I think being able to rent the boats. Whenever we did that a couple times, you could just, for a few minutes, not feel like you're in the bubble. You could actually drive it out to right in front of Magic Kingdom. And I mean, it seemed honestly like an opportunity to step out of the bubble for a minute.
Yeah.
That and golf was pretty good.
Best part of your job, or the best part?
Best part of my job, all of it. I don't know. I love what I do. I've done it essentially something to this degree since I was 16. It taught me how to be a professional, how to work with not just important people, but people of all ranks and ages and backgrounds, and to communicate with people from different countries. And baseball, I used to work with guys who just came from the Dominican Republic and came from nothing, and we're so thankful for every gracious act that you did. And then now I just kind of I just enjoy being around people, and I don't know. I enjoy all of it.
What was the thing you missed most while you were in the bubble?
My wife. Miss my
I was gonna say, did she hear you?
love you. No, thing I miss most, yeah, my wife, I missed her. And that was really it. It was weird to be in the bubble because it wasn't, I missed my bed. Like I missed the comfort of being home. But at the same time, it was almost like when you were there wasn't really a virus other than the fact that everybody was wearing a mask and you got tested every day. That just became normal.
Hmm.
But as soon as we left the bubble and came back home, um, it was back to sanitizing groceries and going the other way when somebody sneezed. I mean, it was just like back to reality, basically.
Yeah. All right, last one from me, and then we'll turn it over. What's the strangest request you've ever received from a player, bubble or not?
That's really tough to think of something. I mean, I just think of my baseball days because as a clubhouse attendant, um, we were asked by players all the time to help them out any which way, whether it was pick their wife up from the airport or, hey, do you like dogs? Can you come dog sit at my house while we're on the road for the next 10 days? So I used to dog sit for a couple players, and they would leave a fridge full of food and say, hey, yeah, bring your friends over if you want, as long as the dogs are getting walked, just come, like, stay at the house for a week. And they paid well, and it was all those little random side work things that was baseball. Whereas basketball, I feel like I'm in a position of power where I just have my system, and the players have to kind of fall in line.
Awesome. All right, I'm gonna go through the questions, and if you, I just made it possible for you to unmute yourself if you want to, but I'm gonna call on people, or if you don't want to, I'm happy to read the question. So starting with Andy Harkavy.
I don't even remember what my question was. I wrote it. Do you have it in front of you?
Yeah,
I
I can ask it for you. How much did you or the Magic step up and do, and did you have to do more because you were in Orlando versus the NBA office or other teams?
The Magic definitely played a big role in just their relationship with Disney as a sponsor and all the behind the scenes stuff. From my end, I was just as much a guest as anybody else was. The only difference was there were some resources that I extended from my side of things to the other equipment managers. So when we met with the NBA and they asked me, do you have a seamstress in Orlando who, in case of emergency, if they can sew jerseys for teams? I had teams that needed to make jerseys throughout the bubble, and we had NBA officials driving out to UCF where the seamstress is, shuttling jerseys back and forth. And then for the NBA finals, all of the NBA finals patches that you saw on the back of be it a game jersey or the sleeve of one of the warm-up jackets, those were all sewn by my seamstress.
That's awesome. Natalie.
Yes, fascinating. Jacob, thank you so much for taking the time. I wish I knew more about basketball so that my questions weren't so. So Andy told me there were 20 teams or 22 teams that started. So were there 22 different resorts / hotels that they stayed in?
So there was 22 teams among what the NBA is normally, it's 30 teams. 8 teams were not invited because they're standings, but of the 22 teams, we were spread across 3 hotels. I think it was 3 hotels, and the way in which we were assigned to these hotels was based on our standings amongst the whole league. So it was we were in the middle of the pack, so we got the middle hotel, which actually was it was the Grand Floridian. It was a very nice hotel. The upper echelon standing teams were put at the Coronado Springs, and the reason why they put all those teams over there, which was also the site of the convention center and where there were many practice courts, so it was convenient. But it was also where they had the longest hotel contract. So they expected these top teams to be there towards the end of the playoffs, so they kept them at that hotel. And it was funny, one of the teams who stayed at the lowest hotel, it was the Portland Trailblazers, and because they ended up making the playoffs, which was unexpected, they had to move from their hotel to our hotel. Imagine how much, teams brought their entire weight room, their entire training room, equipment room, and almost a month into their stay, they had to pick up and relocate to another hotel.
That's crazy. I do have to ask though, so you do laundry for the entire team. Like, how do you not mix up their socks? Like,
simple. Everything is on a laundry loop. So every player for practice has a ring, with a clasp,
okay.
and it's got their t-shirt, their shorts, their tights, their socks. Yeah, if it's on the loop, they're not going to lose it.
Nice.
So when they're
I need some of those at our house.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we all do. Bishop, did you want to ask your question out loud?
Am I making meaningful changes for the new season?
Unmute. The new season, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. The new season is almost upon us. Are you already making meaningful changes in the way you're going to operate in the new season?
We started to make those changes before the bubble in terms of just protocol and sanitization of equipment. But it's kind of still to be determined. We haven't even had really any hard changes like put forth from the league that have been communicated to us yet, if there's anything necessary that we need to do different. But I think collectively, equipment managers are definitely taking precautions and sanitizing equipment. And, we're the people who are on the front lines of this. We are tested every day. So that's a very nice, that's just very helpful to do our job and have that security, even though you never know. But we are always the ones who are picking up dirty towels. And if somebody's going to get the virus or touch it, it could be the guy picking up the dirty towel. So just taking extra precaution with everything we do.
That's a good thing. Just one quick follow-up. I'm guessing, I haven't seen it disclosure yet, but I'm guessing the NBA must be getting calls from around the globe, from other sports leagues and teams, etc., about tips on how to manage echo bubbles or something similar. Do we think we'll see a complete disclosure of something like that?
It's a great question. I know MLB, they started their season by allowing their teams to travel, but they determined halfway through we need to bubble like the NBA did for the playoffs. So they did that, and they bubbled for the playoffs and the World Series. But I think right now it's almost because of the negative financial impacts that have happened in sports and obviously everywhere in other industries. It's almost a sense of just trying to get through it while recouping any lost revenue that we've had in the past. And the only way to recoup that is to play outside of the bubble. Because otherwise you're just hoping that TV ratings are great and this and that. But there's certain markets that are going to allow a percentage of fans in the building. So it's kind of up to each individual team. But I think organizations, whether it's, a place like BBYO for an international convention, if they wanted to hold something like that, you can use some sort of the NBA bubble model for any sort of like mass gathering, if it's at all appropriate in the near future.
I think you're right. Thank you, Jacob. This has been great.
Thank you.
Howard Glazer.
Thank you very much, Dave. Jacob, thank you very much. It's been a wonderful presentation. And with this question, I don't want to be booing from my Brotherhood colleagues. I, as a former basketball referee in high school and college women's basketball, I'd like to know, Jacob, how were the referees integrated into the bubble, and was the entire NBA referee staff used throughout the end of the regular season and the playoffs?
Yes, I don't think the entire NBA staff, but that's a great, I mean, the entire NBA referee staff, it was select ones that were brought in, but if you were an NBA ref in the NBA bubble, you would have loved life. And when we had practices over at the Coronado Springs, I had walked by a ballroom, and outside was a sign that said like NBA referee social center or whatever it was. And they had ping pong, pickleball. I mean, these guys outside of reffing games were just as part of the bubble as everybody else was, and had plenty of like extracurricular activities and food. And I'm sure these guys were enjoying it.
Thank you.
Great. I'm scrolling back up because there's a ton of questions in here, and I also want to be respectful of everyone's time, including yours. So let's see. After Howard, Matt Sadinsky, I don't know if you wanted to ask it out loud or if you want me to ask.
Yeah, no, I'll ask it real quick. Jacob, thank you very much. It's great. And I think that this whole idea of vigilance, agility, and resilience in the bubble is just amazing. I want to ask you about your career. I'm a recruiter, and I work with young people coming out of the Navy and people graduating college all the time, and they're always exploring new careers. Certainly, you had an interesting career path into your career. What advice would you give to somebody who wanted to go into sports medicine? Should they start at 12 years old yelling through, fence, how to be a bat boy, or maybe there's another way?
Yeah, I would say start by getting involved at the absolute like lowest level, wherever you can start. If that's something you're passionate about when you're a teenager, get involved in high school as a an assistant to the basketball team. Just get involved in team sports from like the organizational and operational standpoint. Even if you want to be in the medical field one day, and you want to be an NBA athletic trainer, and you're 15 years old and you have that goal set, just get involved in at doing anything, whether it's doing the team's laundry. Once you have that initial understanding of team sports and what it takes to kind of pull together as one unit, and that definitely helps. But at every level, whether it's high school, collegiate, I just happened to get started at a young age, and there was definitely some elements of luck and persistence, and a lot of it's persistence, and just kind of right place, right time. But just building experience and understanding that these things take time. I noticed like a lot of the young generation, I see it in some of the team attendants who I manage, who work our game nights. They have these high expectations that they want to one day be an NBA trainer or an NBA coach, and they think it's going to happen in like 2-3 years just because they got their degree. That's great and all, but you got to earn your stripes, and you got to be able to communicate and just be a good person.
Thank you very much, David. Good event.
Thank you. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to one final question. I know Howard has had his hand raised for quite a while. So Howard, you're going to be our final question for the night, and then I'll switch it back over to our Brotherhood co-president, Kent, to wrap us up.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me?
You're good?
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm going to ask the sports memorabilia question because I'm the sports memorabilia guy. I've been collecting for over 50 years, and I've been involved in the hobby a long time, and I've got a fairly decent sized collection. So my question to you, Jacob, and thank you for coming on and sharing all your insight in the NBA bubble with us. My question to you is, I know that like back in the 60s in baseball, they had 2 sets of uniforms, even for the Hall of Famers. So there were 4, because there was 2 home and 2 away. So how many sets of uniforms do the NBA players have now? And do they get whatever they want? Can they take whatever they want, or do they have a limit? And then are they charged for additional jerseys or whatever? Because I know this year, since the pandemic started and the ESPN thing with Michael Jordan on the Last Dance, the sports memorabilia market in general, I'm sure you know this, has gone ballistic this year, and the dollars are just phenomenal. So these guys, if they're taking their jerseys or shorts or shoes and signing them, are there unlimited amounts of uniform things that they can get, or are they limited? Is really my question.
So I definitely so just to explain how many uniforms we have going into this season, we have 5 different uniforms that we'll wear over the course of the year. And for each player, I'll have 2 of each. Occasionally players will, and I've kind of set this so they make sure to kind of notify me ahead of time. I always tell them up front, like, listen, if we're going to Houston and you want to give your jersey to your high school basketball coach, just no problem. Just let me know in advance and I'll prepare for it and bring an extra, because if we're in the middle of a road trip and we're on a back-to-back and we play that next night after Houston and I only have 1 jersey and you didn't tell me about it, then I got to get a backup made either in that next city or have one overnighted from Nike or whatever the case may be. If you counted all the jerseys each guy had, he's got 2 of each, 5 different ones. He's got 10 jerseys. And at the end of the season, I normally let them keep 1 of each. And then, I may have our community foundation, may ask for a set. The NBA collects a lot of the uniforms that are worn during the season. The NBA has a partnership, and this could all be looked up online, but the NBA has a partnership with, the card companies like Panini. And so they collect X number of jerseys from LeBron James. So the Lakers equipment manager has to send in 8 LeBron James jerseys every season, a full set of this specific uniform because it's the first time it's ever been worn. So there's a lot of timelines during the season where it's on the equipment manager to work with the NBA and submitting these uniforms. Now what the players, whatever they want to do with their jerseys is their own business at the end of the season. If a guy wants to give away his jersey, at first I used to I would deduct it from their payroll, but it didn't make any sense. And for relationship purposes, I just let them know, hey, just give me a heads up.
Cool, thank you.
Awesome. Well, Jacob, thank you again, as always. It's been fun just reconnecting with you over the last few weeks. And also, I know, I'm getting messages both privately and publicly in the chat of just immense gratitude to you for taking the time, especially, ramping up with the new season right around the corner. Just thank you for joining us tonight and giving us your time, and sharing our thoughts and your experience in the bubble and outside the bubble. So I'm going to turn it over now to wrap us up to Kent, I believe, right?
Thank you. Much better. Dave did such a great job of thanking you, Jacob. I'm not going to try and do it all over again, but it was fantastic. And the Brotherhood truly appreciates your saying yes. And we were happy to accommodate you because it's a real short window. Natalie, Andy, as always, thanks to both of you and whoever else there. You had to twist their arm to make all this happen because it's wonderful. All right. Thanks to everybody who joined us tonight. The good thing about Zoom is we could have 40,000 people on. We didn't, but we could. Maybe next time, Jacob. Happy Thanksgiving if I don't talk to anybody before then. We have a program planned for Hanukkah. I hear we might know tomorrow whether or not it's a go. And if it is, you'll know as soon as we know. but it's a fun, we usually do a latke dinner every year, and obviously we can't do that this year. We're locked out of the bubble this year. We can't get in. So as soon as we can get in, we'll do something. But in the meantime, we are planning on doing something virtual. It's going to be family friendly. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be Hanukkah related, and we'll let you know just as soon as we can. In the meantime, thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jacob, David, and Natalie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.